war had been going poorly for the Galactic Coalition for 3 standard cycles. Admiral Kevrath of the Thessian Empire stood before the holographic display in the command center of Sanctuary Station, watching another fleet marker blink out of existence. The ZH-Car Dominion had just eliminated the 4th Defense Fleet near the Outer Rim territories, and with it, any hope of holding the Eastern Quadrant. "How many ships did we lose?" Kevrath asked, his tri-forked tongue flickering in distress. Commander Yilmora checked her datapad, her scaled hands trembling slightly. 43 capital ships, Admiral, perhaps 200 support vessels. The ZH-Car deployed their new gravitational weapons. Our shields were useless. Kevrath closed his 4 eyes in succession, a gesture of profound grief among his people. The coalition had been formed 2 centuries ago to maintain peace among the 5 major civilizations of the known galaxy. The Thessians, the Vorquin Collective, the Silicate Concordance, the Airline Unity, and the Kresh Commonwealth had managed to coexist through careful diplomacy and mutual defense pacts. But the ZH-Car had changed everything. They had emerged from the galactic core 18 cycles ago, a species so militaristic and advanced that they made the coalitions combined might seem primitive by comparison. Their technology bent the laws of physics in ways that coalition scientists could barely comprehend. Their soldiers were genetically engineered killing machines, each one worth 10 coalition marines, and their appetite for conquest was absolute. "What are our options?" Kevrath asked, though he already knew the answer. "Limited, Admiral," Yilmora replied. "The Council is convening in 1 standard hour. They're discussing surrender terms." "Surrender?" Kevrath's voice carried a mixture of rage and despair. "We would become slaves. You know what the ZH-Car do to conquered species?" "Yes, Admiral, I know." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of extinction. The ZH-Car didn't just conquer, they assimilated. Entire populations were repurposed as biological components in their war machine, their identities erased, their cultures destroyed. It was a fate worse than death. Kevrath was about to dismiss his second-in-command when a junior officer rushed into the command center, his breathing apparatus wheezing with exertion. "Admiral." "Priority communication from the Vorquin diplomatic vessel Far Wanderer. They say it's urgent." "Put it through," Kevrath ordered. The holographic display flickered, and the image of Ambassador Throcknell materialized before them. The Vorquin was an imposing figure, even by his species standards, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 powerful arms and a crystalline exoskeleton that refracted light in dazzling patterns. But what caught Kevrath's attention was the expression on the ambassador's face, or rather, the lack of one. Throcknell's features were frozen in what could only be described as controlled terror. "Admiral Kevrath," Throcknell began, his usually resonant voice reduced to a whisper, "I bring news from the frontier territories, news that may change the course of this war. Speak, Ambassador. At this point I'll take any advantage we can get." Throcknell paused, as if struggling with the words. "We've made contact with a species from the restricted zone." The command center fell silent. Every officer present understood the implications. The restricted zone was a region of space that the coalition had, by unanimous vote, declared off limits 200 cycles ago. It contained approximately 50 star systems, none of which had been fully surveyed. The ban had been absolute, enforced by automated defense satellites and stern warnings in every galactic database. "You violated the Concordat," Kevrath asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Desperate times, Admiral. The Far Wanderer was fleeing a ZH-Car patrol when our jump drive malfunctioned. We emerged in the Sol system, right in the middle of the restricted zone. We expected to die there. Instead, we were rescued." "Rescued by whom?" "By them, Admiral, by the humans." The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. Humans. The species that had been quarantined for 2 centuries after the incident at Kepler Station. The species whose very existence had prompted the creation of the restricted zone. The species that every coalition member was taught to fear from childhood. "You're telling me," Kevrath said slowly, "that you made contact with the most dangerous species in recorded galactic history and they rescued you?" "Yes, Admiral. And there's more. They've offered to help us fight the ZH-Car." The statement was so absurd that Kevrath initially thought he'd misheard. "Help us." Ambassador, the humans are the reason we created the doctrine of preemptive containment. They're the reason we maintain the largest peacetime military in galactic history. They're the reason we teach our children about the dangers of uncontrolled aggression. And you want to bring them into this war. I understand your concerns, Admiral. I shared them. But I've seen what they're capable of now. Their technology has advanced exponentially since the quarantine. Their military, while smaller than ours, is sophisticated beyond anything we imagined. And most importantly, they have something we desperately need. What's that? Experience, Admiral. The humans have been fighting each other for their entire history. They understand war in ways we never wanted to. They've refined the art of conflict to a science. Where we see horror, they see strategy. Where we see loss, they see opportunity. They're not just warriors, Admiral. They're artists of war. Kevrath felt his stomach's churn. The records from Kepler Station had been required reading at the military academy. The humans had been a newly spacefaring species then, barely capable of sustained faster-than-light travel. A coalition research station had been established in their system to study their development and offer guidance toward galactic civilization. It should have been routine. Instead, it had become a nightmare. A misunderstanding had escalated into violence, and the humans had responded with a ferocity that shocked the coalition observers. They hadn't just fought, they had improvised, adapted, and overcome with a ruthless efficiency that seemed almost pathological. In less than 3 standard days, they had destroyed the research station, captured or killed all personnel, and reverse-engineered coalition technology at a pace that shouldn't have been possible. The surviving coalition members had spoken of humans with a mixture of awe and terror. They described a species that seemed to relish combat, that turned warfare into a form of expression, that found meaning in violence. The decision to quarantine them had been unanimous, and the restricted zone had been established to contain what the Council termed an evolutionary aberration too dangerous to integrate. "This is madness," Kevrath said. "You're suggesting we release a contained threat to fight another threat. What happens when the humans win, assuming they could win, which I doubt? Do we simply ask them politely to return to their cage?" I had the same concerns, Admiral, but after spending time with them, I believe the situation is more nuanced than our histories suggest. Yes, humans are dangerous. Yes, they're aggressive, but they're also honorable in their way. They have codes of conduct, rules of engagement. They understand the concept of measured force, and more than that, they hate bullies. Bullies. The ZH car, Admiral. The humans learned of what the ZH car have done to conquered populations, and they were outraged, genuinely outraged. They see the ZH car as the worst kind of predator, and humans, I've learned, have a peculiar instinct when it comes to predators. They hunt them. Kevrath considered this. The historical records did mention that humans had evolved as persistent predators on their homeworld, hunting prey across vast distances until the target collapsed from exhaustion. It was one of the traits that made them so unsettling. Most sentient species had evolved as either herbivores or opportunistic omnivores. True persistence predators were rare, and persistence predators that developed tool use and abstract thought were virtually unheard of. How many humans are we talking about? Kevrath asked. Their current population is approximately 14 billion spread across their home system and 3 colony systems. Their military numbers in the hundreds of millions, though they assure me they can mobilize far more if needed. And their fleet, smaller than ours but technologically sophisticated. They've developed weapons systems that I don't fully understand. Their captain, a man named Jake Morrison, demonstrated one for me. They call it a railgun. It accelerates a solid projectile to relativistic speeds using electromagnetic force. No energy weapons, no plasma, just a chunk of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. He said it was ancient technology for them, something they'd been using for centuries. Kevrath felt a chill run through his body. Kinetic weapons at those velocities would be devastating. The energy transfer alone would be catastrophic, and unlike energy weapons, there was no way to dissipate or redirect the force. It would punch through shields and armor like they weren't there. "What do they want in return?" Kevrath asked. "No species offers military aid without expectations." "They want the quarantine lifted," Throcknell replied. They want full membership in the Galactic Coalition. They want to be treated as equals, not as contained threats. And Admiral, after seeing what they've built in isolation, after meeting their people, I believe they've earned it. The Council will never agree to this. The Council is preparing to surrender, Admiral. What do we have to lose? That was the question, wasn't it? The Coalition was facing extinction. The ZH-car would show no mercy, would grant no quarter. Within a cycle, perhaps two, every Coalition species would be reduced to biological machinery, their civilizations erased from history. Against that fate, unleashing the humans seemed almost reasonable. I'll present your proposal to the Council, Kevrath said, but I make no promises. The fear of humans runs deep. I understand, Admiral, but consider this. The humans have a saying that I found particularly relevant. They say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Perhaps it's time we put that wisdom to the test. The hologram faded, leaving Kevrath alone with his thoughts and his fears. He had 1 hour to decide whether to recommend unleashing humanities upon the galaxy. 1 hour to determine if salvation lay in the very thing they had spent 2 centuries trying to contain. The council chambers on Sanctuary Station were circular, with each of the 5 major coalition species occupying a section of the ring. The architecture was designed to promote equality, with no species positioned above or below another. Holographic displays floated in the center, showing real-time data on fleet positions, casualty reports, and territorial losses. The numbers painted a grim picture. Admiral Kevrath stood at the center podium, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. High Counselor Veshkara of the Airline Unity chittered nervously, her insectoid features twitching with barely contained anxiety. Overseer Dralmoth of the Kresh Commonwealth sat motionless, his massive frame hunched in what Kevrath recognized as deep contemplation. Speaker Tilvar of the Silicate Concordance glowed with a soft blue light, indicating concern in his crystalline people. And presiding over them all was Prime Coordinator Zenthul of the Theshan Empire, Kevrath's own superior and the elected leader of the coalition. Admiral Kevrath, Zenthul began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. You requested this emergency session. The floor is yours. Kevrath activated the podium's controls, and the holographic displays shifted to show data from Throcknell's report. Images of human ships, weapon specifications, demographic information, and perhaps most importantly, footage from Kepler Station 200 cycles ago. Honored counselors, Kevrath began, I come before you with a proposal that I know will be controversial. Ambassador Throcknell has made contact with the humans in the restricted zone. They have offered to assist us in our war against the ZH-car Dominion. The reaction was immediate. Veshkara's chittering became a shriek. Dralmoth lurched forward in his seat. Even the usually placid Tilvar flickered red with alarm. Only Zenthul remained calm, though Kevrath could see the tension in his superior's posture. This is unacceptable, Veshkara shouted. The quarantine exists for good reason. The humans are unstable, violent, unpredictable. They nearly destroyed a coalition facility simply because of a minor diplomatic misunderstanding. With respect, Counselor, Kevrath replied, the incident at Kepler Station occurred 200 cycles ago. Species can change. The humans have had 2 centuries to develop their civilization in isolation. According to Ambassador Throcknell, they've made remarkable progress. Progress in what? Dralmoth rumbled. In building better weapons. In refining their capacity for violence. Admiral, I reviewed the Kepler Station records before this meeting. The humans didn't just fight us, they reveled in it. They showed creativity and destruction that disturbed even our military analysts. These are not beings we want loose in the galaxy. I agree the humans are dangerous, Kevrath said. But so are the ZH-car. The difference is that the ZH-car want to destroy us, while the humans simply want to be free of the quarantine. If we're looking at extinction anyway, why not use every tool available? Because some tools are too dangerous to wield, Tilvar chimed in, his voice like crystal bells. The humans represent an existential threat to galactic stability. Yes, we face extinction from the ZH-car, but if we bring the humans into this conflict, we may simply be choosing a different form of extinction. At least the ZH-car are predictable in their goals. Can we say the same for humans? Zenthill raised a clawed hand, calling for silence. Admiral, I want to see the weapons demonstration that Ambassador Throcknell mentioned. Show us what the humans are offering. Kevrath nodded and activated a new holographic file. The image showed a human vessel, sleek and angular in design, clearly built for combat rather than exploration. The ship was perhaps a quarter the size of a coalition cruiser, but there was something menacing about its profile, something that suggested form following function with ruthless efficiency. This is the human warship Defiant, Kevrath explained. It's classified as a destroyer in their naval terminology. The footage you're about to see was recorded by Ambassador Throcknell during his visit to the human space station they call Gateway. The hologram shifted to show the Defiant approaching a target, an asteroid approximately 2 kilometers in diameter. There was a brief flash from the human ship, barely visible, and then the asteroid simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, solid and real, and the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated vapor and fragments. That was a single railgun round, Kevrath said quietly, traveling at approximately 30% of light speed. The kinetic energy released on impact was equivalent to a small nuclear device, and the humans can fire these weapons in rapid succession. They have larger versions mounted on their capital ships. The council chamber was silent. Even Veshkara had stopped chittering. There's more, Kevrath continued. The humans have developed what they call nuclear-pumped laser weapons, devices that use controlled nuclear explosions to generate coherent energy beams of unprecedented power. They have antimatter warheads, though they assure us these are reserved for the most extreme circumstances. And perhaps most ingeniously, they've weaponized gravity itself, using focused gravitational waves to tear apart enemy vessels at the molecular level. That last one, Zenthill said slowly. That sounds similar to what the ZHCar deployed against our Fourth Fleet. Yes, Prime Coordinator. The humans developed this technology independently during their isolation. They call it a gravity lance, and according to their military advisors, it's quite effective against heavily shielded targets. Drowmoth leaned forward. How is this possible? We've had faster-than-light travel for millennia, access to countless worlds and resources. The humans have been confined to 4 systems for 2 centuries. How have they developed weapons that match or exceed anything we possess? I asked Ambassador Throcknell the same question, Kevrath replied. His answer was disturbing but illuminating. He said that humans don't innovate despite conflict. They innovate because of conflict. Competition, even combat, drives their technological development in ways that peaceful cooperation never could for us. The ambassador believes that isolating them, containing them in a limited space with limited resources, may have actually accelerated their advancement. They had no choice but to become more efficient, more creative, more deadly with what they had. Evolutionary pressure, Tilvar mused. We tried to cage them and instead we created a pressure cooker. We forced them to adapt or die and they adapted in the most dangerous ways possible. Exactly, Kevrath agreed. And now we have a choice. We can continue to face the ZHCar alone and accept extinction, or we can accept the humans' offer and at least die fighting. Or perhaps, if we're fortunate, we might actually win. And if we do win, Veshkara asked, what then? The humans will have proven themselves in battle, demonstrated their power to the entire galaxy. How do we put them back in the cage after that? How do we tell them they must return to the restricted zone and remain there for our peace of mind? We don't, Zenthill said quietly. All eyes turned to the Prime Coordinator. If we accept the humans' aid, if we invite them to fight alongside us, then we must be prepared to honor our agreement. They want full membership in the coalition, equal status with the rest of us. If they help us defeat the ZHCar, they will have earned it. Prime Coordinator, Drowmoth protested, that's madness. You're talking about legitimizing the most dangerous species in known space. I'm talking about survival, Overseer, and about honor. If we make a deal with the humans, we must keep it. The alternative is to face the ZHCar alone, and we all know how that will end. I've reviewed the casualty projections. At current attrition rates, we have less than 1 cycle before coalition space is overrun. Our fleets are broken. Our weapons are ineffective. Our options have run out. Zentho paused, his 4 eyes closing in sequence again, that gesture of profound grief. When he opened them, his gaze was steady. I propose we accept the humans' offer. We invite them to join the Coalition's war effort, with the understanding that successful cooperation will lead to full membership. All in favor. The silence stretched. Kevrath could see the struggle on each counselor's face, the tension between survival instinct and deeply ingrained fear. Finally, slowly, Zentho raised his hand in affirmation. After another moment, Tilvar's crystalline form pulsed with agreement. Dralmoth followed, his massive hand lifted reluctantly. That left only Veshkara, the Erlon representative, still trembling with obvious fear. "Counselor Veshkara," Zentho prompted gently. "Your vote." The insectoid delegate made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh, Kevrath couldn't tell which. Then, with visible effort, she raised her forelimb in agreement. "Unanimous," Zentho declared. "Admiral Kevrath, you are authorized to make contact with the humans and coordinate joint military operations. May the ancestors forgive us if we're making a mistake. And help us," Veshkara added, "if we're not." 3 standard days later, Admiral Kevrath found himself aboard the Far Wanderer, traveling at maximum speed toward the Sol system. Ambassador Throcknell had provided detailed navigation data, including the location of the human space station gateway and the appropriate communication protocols. Kevrath had spent those 3 days reviewing every scrap of information available on humans, trying to understand the species he was about to ask for help. What he found was deeply unsettling. Humans were contradictions made flesh. They were capable of profound compassion and horrific cruelty, often simultaneously. They created art of breathtaking beauty while designing weapons of unimaginable destruction. They formed deep emotional bonds with each other and with other species, yet they had spent most of their history finding reasons to kill each other over differences in appearance, belief, or resource access. They were persistent predators who had never lost that hunting instinct, even as they built civilizations and reached for the stars. They were social creatures who needed community to thrive, yet they celebrated individualism to an extreme degree. They were logical and emotional, peaceful and warlike, generous and selfish, all at the same time. "We're approaching the Sol system, Admiral," the Far Wanderer's captain announced. "Human vessels are already moving to intercept. They're transmitting a greeting in standard Coalition language." "Put it through," Kevrath ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human male in what was obviously a military uniform. He appeared to be in his mid-life cycle, with short brown hair graying at the temples and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His face was weathered, lined with experience, and there was a quality to his expression that Kevrath recognized from looking in the mirror after long campaigns. This was someone who had seen combat, who had commanded in battle, who carried the weight of soldiers' lives on his shoulders. "Coalition vessel Far Wanderer, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. Ambassador Throcknell informed us you'd be arriving. Welcome to the Sol system. It's been a long time since we've had official visitors." Kevrath stepped forward, making sure he was visible on the transmission. "Admiral Morrison, I am Admiral Kevrath of the Theshan Imperial Fleet, currently serving as Coalition Joint Chief of Military Operations. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I formally request a meeting to discuss potential military cooperation against the ZHKar Dominion." Morrison's expression didn't change, but Kevrath thought he detected a slight smile at the corners of the human's mouth. "Request granted, Admiral. We have a briefing room prepared on Gateway Station. My people will transmit docking procedures. One thing, though. Yes, leave your weapons on your ship, not because we don't trust you, but because we want this to be a conversation between allies, not a negotiation between enemies. Can you agree to that?" Kevrath considered the request. It was reasonable, even sensible, and if the humans wanted to attack the Far Wanderer, they wouldn't need to wait until he was aboard their station. "Agreed, Admiral Morrison. We will comply with your request." "Excellent. See you shortly, Admiral Kevrath. Gateway out." The transmission ended, and Kevrath found himself staring at the view screen, which now showed the approaching human station. Gateway was massive, easily twice the size of Sanctuary Station, and it bristled with weapons. Railgun turrets, missile batteries, energy weapon emplacements, and several systems that Kevrath couldn't immediately identify. The station was a fortress, designed not just to defend but to project power across an entire system. "They've been preparing for war," Throcknell observed, coming to stand beside Kevrath. "For 200 cycles they've been building, innovating, readying themselves. They never accepted the quarantine, Admiral. They simply bided their time. That's what worries me, Ambassador. What happens when beings this militant, this focused on conflict, are unleashed on the galaxy? We may defeat the ZH-Car only to create an even greater threat." "Perhaps," Throcknell replied. "Or perhaps we'll discover that the humans are exactly what the galaxy needs, not in spite of their nature but because of it. The ZH-Car understand only strength. They respect only force. We've been trying to fight them with the mindset of species that value peace, that see war as aberration. The humans are different. For them, war isn't an aberration. It's a natural state that they've learned to master. Maybe that's what it takes to defeat an enemy like the ZH-Car." The Far Wanderer docked without incident, and Kevrath led a small delegation through the airlocks and into Gateway Station. The interior was functional rather than aesthetic, with exposed conduits and reinforced bulkheads that spoke of engineering practicality over artistic expression. But it was also clean, well-maintained, and bustling with activity. Humans moved through the corridors with purpose, many in military uniforms, others in what Kevrath assumed were civilian clothes. They glanced at the Coalition delegation with curiosity but not hostility. Admiral Morrison was waiting in a briefing room that overlooked Earth, the human homeworld. Kevrath had seen images of the planet before, but seeing it in person was different. It was beautiful, a swirling sphere of blue and white and green, teeming with life. It was easy to forget, looking at such a peaceful vista, that this world had produced one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "Admiral Kevrath," Morrison said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for coming. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." Kevrath accepted the hand, noting the firm grip, the calluses that spoke of hands-on work. "Thank you for receiving us, Admiral Morrison. I'll be direct. The Coalition is losing the war against the ZH-Car. Our forces are depleted, our technology is inadequate, and our time is running out. We need help, and according to Ambassador Throcknell, you've offered to provide it." "That's correct," Morrison replied. "But before we get into the tactical details, I want to make sure we understand each other. Your people quarantined us 200 years ago because you were afraid of what we might become. I get that. The incident at Kepler Station was a tragedy, one that could have been avoided with better communication on both sides. We've learned from that. We've grown. But we've never forgotten that your Coalition decided we were too dangerous to exist freely in the galaxy. I understand your resentment, Admiral." "It's not resentment," Morrison said quietly. "It's clarity. We know what you think of us. We know what you fear. And we're offering to help anyway, not because we've forgiven the quarantine, but because the alternative is worse. The ZH-Car are everything we despise: genocide on an industrial scale, slavery elevated to philosophy, the strong devouring the weak without mercy or limit. We won't stand by and watch them destroy civilizations, even civilizations that imprisoned us." Kevrath felt something shift in his understanding of humans. He had expected bravado, demands, perhaps even threats. Instead, he was getting something far more nuanced, a species that understood its own nature and chose to act according to principles rather than grudges. "What do you want in return for your assistance?" Kevrath asked. "What we've always wanted: freedom, full membership in the Galactic Coalition, the right to explore, trade, and interact with other species without restrictions. We want the quarantine ended, permanently and completely. And we want it in writing, signed by all Coalition members, irrevocable even if we win this war and you decide we're scary again." "The Council has agreed to those terms," Kevrath confirmed. "If we defeat the ZH-Car with human assistance, you will be granted full membership. You have my word and the word of the Prime Coordinator." Morrison studied him for a long moment, those sharp eyes seeming to peer into Kevrath's very soul. Then he nodded. "All right, Admiral, let's win a war." The briefing that followed lasted for 6 standard hours. Morrison had assembled a team of human military specialists, each one an expert in different aspects of warfare. There was Commander Lisa Grant, a tactical analyst who dissected the ZH-Car's operational patterns with surgical precision. There was Dr. Alan Foster, a physicist who explained the theoretical foundations of the human's most advanced weapons in terms that Kevrath could barely follow. And there was General Marcus Cole, a grizzled veteran who had apparently fought in numerous human conflicts and brought that experience to bear on the ZH-Car problem. The ZH-Car have 3 main advantages, Cole explained, gesturing at a holographic display showing recent battle data. Superior firepower, superior shields, and superior numbers. They can punch through our defenses, we can't punch through theirs, and they have more ships to throw at us. In conventional warfare, those advantages would be insurmountable. Hence why we're losing, Kevrath said dryly. Exactly, but conventional warfare is optional, Admiral. The ZH-Car fight like they're playing a video game, overwhelming force applied directly to the target until the target breaks. It's effective, sure, but it's also predictable. They've won so many battles using this approach that they've never needed to adapt, never needed to innovate. That's their weakness. How do we exploit it? Kevrath asked. Grant leaned forward. Asymmetric warfare, Admiral. We don't fight them on their terms. We use tactics that their doctrine doesn't account for, strategies that their commanders won't anticipate. Humans have been practicing asymmetric warfare since the first caveman figured out that a smaller group with better positioning could defeat a larger group in the open. We know how to turn disadvantages into advantages. Give me an example, Kevrath demanded. Morrison activated a new hologram, this one showing a simulated battle space. The ZH-Car rely heavily on their shields and their gravitational weapons. The shields disperse energy attacks and deflect most projectiles. The gravitational weapons tear apart anything with significant mass. It's a devastating combination, but it has vulnerabilities. Such as mass and energy, Morrison replied. Their shields are designed to stop those things. But what about information? Kevrath blinked in confusion. I don't understand. Dr. Foster spoke up, his excitement evident. The ZH-Car shields work by creating a field that interacts with incoming matter and energy. But information isn't matter or energy in the traditional sense. It's the arrangement of matter and energy. Their shields can stop a missile, but they can't stop a broadcast. And if we can get our transmissions past their shields, we can affect their systems directly. You're talking about cyberwarfare, Kevrath said, understanding dawning. You want to hack into ZH-Car vessels and disable them from within. More than that, Grant added. We want to rewrite their operational parameters, make them think our ships are their ships and vice versa. Imagine a ZH-Car battleship suddenly identifying every other ZH-Car ship as hostile and opening fire on its own fleet. That would be chaos. Kevrath felt a chill run through his body. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. The Coalition had never seriously explored cyberwarfare because their society was built on trust and communication. The idea of weaponizing information, of turning an enemy's systems against them, was antithetical to everything they valued. But humans had clearly spent centuries perfecting this art. Can you actually do this? Kevrath asked. The ZH-Car systems are alien, built on technology we barely understand. How would you even begin to compromise them? Morrison smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Admiral, we've had 200 years to study every piece of Coalition technology we could get our hands on. We reverse-engineered your ship designs, your weapons, your computer systems. We know how galactic civilizations build things. And the ZH-Car, advanced as they are, still follow the same basic principles. Their systems have to communicate, have to process data, have to make decisions. That means they have vulnerabilities. We just need to find them. This will take time, Kevrath protested. We don't have time. The ZH-Car are advancing on multiple fronts. Within a cycle, maybe less, they'll reach the core systems. Then we buy time, Cole said. We use conventional forces to slow the ZH-Car advance while our specialists work on the cyber attack. Hit and run tactics, guerrilla warfare, anything to keep them off balance. We make them chase us, make them commit resources to hunting scattered forces. Meanwhile, we build the weapon that will actually win the war." Kevrath looked around the room at these humans, at their confident expressions, and their casual discussion of tactics that would never occur to coalition commanders. He realized that Throcknell had been right. These beings understood war in ways that peaceful species simply couldn't. They had refined violence into a science, had turned conflict into an art form. It was disturbing, unsettling, and at the moment exactly what the coalition needed. "All right," Kevrath said. "Let's discuss integration. How quickly can you mobilize your forces?" Morrison consulted a datapad. "We can have the first battle group ready to deploy within 2 standard days. That's 15 capital ships, 40 destroyers, and support craft. The second and third battle groups will follow within a week. In total, we can commit approximately 80% of our Navy to this operation." 80%? Admiral Morrison, you're leaving your home system nearly defenseless. "No, Admiral. We're trusting that you meant what you said about honoring our agreement. If we're going to be allies, really truly allies, then we need to trust each other. You're asking us to fight your war. We're asking you to protect our home while we do it."